Welcome to Creativ8. Let's talk about process. Process is a really tricky thing for game designers, game developers. It's almost a religious topic. And this is going to be probably one of the most controversial things I think that people will love or hate about Creativ8 is that this is something that I've learned over the last 30 years of designing games, and it's a lot of my special processes. It's a lot of my ability and what I've come to believe in is the way that we need to design games and how they're done. And Creativ8 embraces a lot of that. It's a new way of working. It's not just the tool, but it's the process that we have to work in. And I think that, the how we make a game, especially how we design a game, is just as important as what we design, right? The process of how we go about it, the how do we succeed? How do we find a great product? How do we make, something great is just as important as that final idea that comes onto the paper. And so whether you believe in, writing massive, huge GDDs, design specs and having lots of process, or whether you believe in having none of it, or whether you live somewhere like myself in the middle, there's not right or wrong answers there, but there's reasons why process, is important. And so this is kind of the elephant in the room. There's a lot of people that may say, well, why do we spend time on process? Why do we spend time? Why shouldn't we just be in there making things? And I do disagree. And Creativ8 embraces this idea that you can have a process, and that process can be very fast and be much more efficient than it ever has been, but it is there, and it does allow you to succeed. So first of all, we'll talk about the process of what to do, right? And the process of what to do and what's built into Creativ8 is a full production process pipeline. You can schedule, you can put all of your tasks in here. You can work in Kanban style. You can work, in Gantt charts. You can work in any way you want to process content. But from a game design's perspective, what's great is all of the processes are already kind of there. You can easily change any of this. If you don't want to use a particular step, if you don't want to do something, just take it out. It's really easy to have this process, but typical Kanban view, if you want to move it later, you can move it to later in the process, right? And so Creativ8 walks you through from ideas all the way through, the totality of what you're going to build, all the way through the entire process of your entire project, from the idea all the way through the launch. And we've broken down, all of those tasks, but you can come in here to this view at any time. You can say, well, I'm gone a little bit farther. You can also automate this so that the automation, can see, when are these things done? When are they approved? And that kind of stuff. But this at a glance allows the design teams to really kind of come in here and see what do I need to do and when? I can also very quickly see what's blocked, what's not blocked. I can get to the documents that relate to those things, and so it becomes kind of an overview of, again, trying to see and trying to understand what do I need and when, and who's kind of codependent on me. And this is really the kind of the easy part of the process, but I wanted to show that this process is fully integrated into Creativ8. And this idea that it's not just a design tool, but it's a full scheduling, process management, pipelines, all these things are fully integrated into Creativ8. And something that you don't have to go somewhere else to work on these things. You can very quickly come in here and see who is assigned to these things, who's doing them, when does it do, all these things. And I don't have to go out to another tool. I don't have to go out to another, place and try to find the same thing and figure out where it is. I can see it all in one place. And that's the beauty of Creativ8. But what's really special and what's really different, and probably honestly the most controversial thing, is going to be, how do you do it? Right? How do you design? Do you just sit with a blank piece of paper and you start writing, a GDD? Do you go into a wiki and just start kind of creating things? How and where do you start your game designs? Do you start with maybe an old template? How do you get started? And this is really tricky because the how you get started, can quite often be this just kind of deer in the headlights. You're staring into this thing that, you don't know what to really build. And Creativ8 gets rid of all that because it starts you off with a lot of the things that you need to know right from the start. It starts you off with templates. It starts you off with all the content. We've talked a lot about this in the past, but how is this different, right? I don't have to start as a designer if I don't want to start writing these big, long documents. Yes, you can. There's nothing that stops you. There's a full wiki inside of Creativ8. You can come in here and write 10,000 pages if you really want to. But that's not the right way to design. We all know that. right? But when you start mixing in writing and world building and game design and all these things together, it gets really hard and really confusing, right? And so one of the first things is to really understand that this idea that Creativ8 comes included with thousands and thousands of pre-configured features. You can really come in here and say like, do I want to use these things? Yes or no. And what's the beauty of this is it creates conversations. It allows you and your team to sit down and go like, is this thing the right thing to have? Is this what we want? Is this a good idea or a bad idea? Let's have a conversation around that. Right? And I don't have to sit and write a long document necessarily. Now, if something's really special, maybe, right? But I really embrace the 80-20 rule. 80% of what you're going to build should be kind of off the shelf. It should be things that people are familiar with. It should be things that your players are familiar with. If you're reinventing every wheel, you've got a problem probably. You're probably doing something too big and too ambitious. So this is not necessarily going to cover everything of like every new pillar, every new super innovative idea. That still has to come from your brain. That's still what you're paid for as a game designer, right? But this allows you to kind of come in here and see the rest. And it's that death by 10,000 cuts that this is trying to avoid. Because literally there's tens of thousands of features in a video game. And quite often, you may or may not know what, is a great feature here, right? So you can come in here and you can select the things that you want, take out the things you want, and have these conversations. Use this as brainstorming. Come in here and figure out, what do I want my characters to have, right? And these thousands of already pre-included things not only help you brainstorm, but help you make these decisions, help you figure out what these things are, but also see if this is something that's really fun. See if these are things that you really want, and also realize the things you're missing, right? And so Creativ8, recommends a lot of stuff and pushes things at you and says, hey, you might want to have this because this is what other shooters have. This is what other RPGs have. These things like that. So that's a beauty of Creativ8 is it helps you kind of find those features that you want. It helps you recommend, in this process. So when you first get started, it recommends a process to go through. And that process first is start with your high level. What is it? What is your theme? What is what is it that you're building? What are those features? And so when you choose, say, a first-person shooter, it's going to come in here and it's going to recommend your first set of high-level features. These are the biggest, the scariest, the big, huge buckets that are there. Like, do you have enemies in the game? Are we doing a shooter? Right? Maybe we're not doing a shooter. Maybe we're just doing a story-based game. So maybe I want to turn off combat and enemies and weapons and some of those kind of things. But these are things that if you add them later, you might be in a little bit of trouble. Doesn't mean that you're going to be completely screwed, but you're going to have some trouble, right? So Creativ8 helps you start to identify primary, secondary, tertiary things. It helps you identify the pillars of the game. It helps you to identify those things early on so you don't get caught blindsided by something later that nobody thought about. Nobody realized oh, God, we needed multiplayer. Why didn't we think about that? You can't just tack that stuff on later and really expect success, right? So start to have those conversations with your team, start to understand these things. And even if all you're doing right now is saying multiplayer, yes or no, at least somebody made a decision that will help drive, the scope, the scale, the budgets, the technology, the design decisions, all these millions of things that one decision could help you drive, right? So you're starting off with this mile-high view, as we say. We're driving down or we're drilling down. Okay, now if we're doing multiplayer, do we have cooperative multiplayer, right? What kind of multiplayer do we have? So each one of these things, Creativ8 will take you through and hold your hand to kind of say, well, what do you mean by that? Right? What do you mean by a story? Do you have cutscenes? Do you have characters? Do you have dialogue? What do you mean? Is it non-interactive? Is it interactive? Is it branching? Is there multiple endings? How many characters do we need? How are we going to talk to them? Right? Creativ8 helps designers answer those questions. It helps you do it really fast, right? Because you're just going in there and selecting a lot of content. And remember, these contents are all filtered. Depending on what I'm trying to make, I can come in here and figure out what kind of themes I want, what kinds of my gameplay genres and all these things. These are just a few examples of literally tens of thousands of things you get to choose from to help you kind of understand. So this is just to kind of show what drop-down menus kind of look like. What do your features kind of look like again? What are these things in the world and how is this database, right? So early on, the difference in the change is you're working on selecting things, you're working on stuff. But if you don't know, what something is, you can always dive into it deeper. Like, right? So you can come in here and you can see like, okay, well, what stuff does my player really need? Do I want to have something that flies? And then that's turned on, say, the jetpack, right? And so that's what I call a gear enabler. A gear enabler lets me, is a object that allows me to have that ability. But I could come in here and I could add stats. These are just a few examples of some of those things that are in here. Like, right? And again, I can, deep dive into these things or not. I can see if these are just for my player. I can put these into my NPCs. And so you can see that there's a lot of different features that can all kind of go into these things. I can see where right in my same interface, what's the status? I need to discuss it. Should it be cut, removed? Is it approved? All those kinds of things. And so you can very quickly come in here and decide, are these things that I'm using? Are these things that I'm not using, right? And so you can have lots of different interfaces, lots of different ways to kind of look at the same content. And so this very quickly allows you to put together, incredibly vast amounts of things that you can really try to understand, right? But this also will use AI and a combination of factors to help you, generate full GDDs that you can understand. So if you want to work and read and see, things in a traditional value, these things are all generated in the system. These things don't necessarily have to be written as a single page. So if you change, the name of something, if I wanted to not call this bounty hunter, but now I want to call this the scalper, these things are smart objects. These things are stuff that are actually intelligent in the game. It's not just as simple as saying copy and replace. These things actually understand what I'm trying to do. These things actually understand what they are. And so, all the way down to the naming conventions of things and stuff like that, it allows me to kind of understand what all that stuff is. And so the process that we go through when we're building a level and we're building a game design and we're world building and we're doing all these things is just completely and totally different when you're working in Creativ8. You can start with an executive summary here, right? An executive summary is typically, a one-pager, we often call it, right? Somebody tells you, what are you building? What platforms is it on, right? What's its monetization processes? What's the technologies that I'm using? What are the rendering styles, right? It's asking you the important questions. It's getting you to understand all those things. It's getting you to understand the budgets. It's getting you to understand, everything about it. When is it launching? When is it going to be done? What kinds of themes and stuff does it have, in it? And you can see there's lots and lots and lots of things I can choose from, right? And so, but all of this stuff affects the process. And you can come in here and figure out, again, how do I make hybrids? How do I make something that's kind of interesting? And how do I make something that's different? And simple choices like the cameras, all these things are designed to be, what drives the product, like, right? What is this thing that I need to do? And so everything starts with these templates, right? And this is just one example of hundreds of templates that come with Creativ8, just to show you that these templates are really important. These templates are things that allow you to work much faster. They're much, and not miss things and stuff, right? And so there's just a tremendous amount that you can do with Creativ8. And so, you need to understand, that these templates can help you really break down an entire game. Before I let you go, I'll show you one more template. This is my story level breakdown template. This thing uses, currently both 3-act and 9-act story structures. It can include the hero's journey by Joseph Campbell and different things. And so you can see here in yellow, it gives you different structures. It allows you to kind of see, again, what is the acts of my story? It allows me to put in the chapters. It allows me to put in various things like here's level 1, like, right? Here's level 2. I can put all these things in a linear or nonlinear fashion, branching or not, but it gives me kind of a structure. Here's my second act of the story. And so I'm starting to put all these things together. This template allows you to see your entire game. It allows you to see, in this particular case, a 9-act story structure, and allows me to kind of see what are these things that are doing. You can see here's a hero's journey event, that is about finding, some tests and some allies and some enemies, and these can relate to your levels here, right? But you can also see like where are these levels taking place? where, who's taking place at these events. And so you can keep adding events in here. And these can be story events. These can be, things that might affect the level. These could be things that affect the AI. These could be things that affect anything from gameplay to story or anything else. But you can also put in backstory. You can put in things about characters. You can help build your world that's even beyond the game. You can build this across multiple games. You can build in stuff, that might be important in the mythology of the universe, the history of the universe, the backstories, all these kind of things. But it also helps kind of drive you to understand, like, who am I going to need in this world? Like, right? And then even, tries to ask you things like, what's the event complication? Maybe something bad happens, like, right? So it also helps you kind of figure out, like, how much time and minutes, is each thing taking? Is this level, going to be an hour? Is this level going to be, a few minutes? Or is this area, what's going to happen there? So you can start to see, like, how big and how long is your game, like, right? So this one template alone allows you to kind of really figure out, like, what is, coming on here, what's going to be interesting. Why is this going to be exciting? But again, also track the dates. I can track, when is this due? When's the start date? How long is this task going to take? All in one place, right? So it allows those teams. But if I don't want to see, if I'm just say a designer and I don't want to see the production stuff, I can set that flag. I can say, don't show me production. Don't show me, budgets. Don't show me things I'm not supposed to see. Don't show me things I'm not interested in. And so all of these views can be customized to allow you to really focus in on exactly what you want to see. So keep in mind, Creativ8, is a very new and different tool. It uses templates and AI and understanding data in whole new ways that allows you to work in just a completely new and different way than you've ever worked before. So I hope this quick little overview here kind of shows you about the process of Creativ8 and how the process of how we design is just fundamentally different than we would in a traditional game. And again, you can build this, and use your processes exactly the way you are today. You can write this out long format style in a wiki. There's nothing that stops you from working the way you want to work. But Creativ8 offers some new ways. And Creativ8 offers some much faster and better ways. And so we hope you will be willing to give it a try and to see that this new process is not only fundamentally faster, but will lead to much better and much more fun games. Thank you.